Hello, Perceptionists.
Welcome to Perceptionist Anonymous.
I'm Emily.
I'm Christiane. And you guys, today Emily and I, we have to like cut ourselves off at the beginning of our in the middle of our conversation so that we have something to bullshit about at the beginning of our show. You know what I mean? So we're about to start talking about how we came up with the idea of this episode. And what we're talking about today is essentially the idea of like topographical magic. Land energy, is that it?
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, basically both of us really like outside, and
I'm really fond of Earth.
nature stuff is pretty, but basically we thought it would be cool to talk, because we've talked about, like, I mean, elements of elemental magic and things like that before. Sure. But we haven't actually talked about the magic and energies of land and where we are in the world, and the different energies based on our physical, like, geographical location and the geographics of wherever we travel to and that sort of thing. And so Christy actually came up with the idea for this, which I loved so much. She like pitched it to me and I was like, yes, like, let's do it. And of course, right?
Driving, sending you a voice message. I'm like, I drive a fucking stick shift. I'm like on the freeway. I'm like, I better get this out. Before I forget.
And then of course I sit down to research it and I'm like, what do I do?
I thought you were just gonna fucking tune in to the mountain and shit.
Well, that's what I ended up doing. But of course my brain goes, let's talk about history first. So at first I wanted to talk about like the way historical peoples came connected with the land, etc. So I do have some on that. But then other than that, it's just like, let's talk about the energy of touching things.
It's been a long, I remember touching things.
Oh,
in a minute.
Worthiest quarantine statement ever.
That's cool. I'm really glad that you did that. I did something different. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I kind of just tuned into, like, you guys know me though, anyone that listens to this show, I'm like, my specialty is in like the psychology and symbolism and archetypal like energies of things, like what they represent to us and how we can use them to tune into certain things. So that's how I took it. I do have an adorable joke though.
Please tell me your adorable joke.
So, you know, you guys also, you know us, our jokes are moderately relevant. So here we go. What kind of shorts do clouds wear?
What kind of shorts do clouds wear?
Thunderwear. I think it's so cute. I was like, oh my God. I thought it was so adorable.
I love it so much. I have a joke. It's not as funny, but I enjoy it. I love that. I'm such a sucker for puns though that it's like a problem. Anyway, what does a psychic and a cartographer have in common?
What do they have in common?
They both specialize in projections.
You know, and I'm still figuring that joke out.
Well, the cartographer is a map maker, so they have to project the way that the land actually goes. And then
guess, that's like, all right. All right, right on. So I was like, projection being the alternate word. I guess I would have thought like drawing, but I guess, yeah. Anyway, I'm into it. Right on.
What does a psychic and a cartographer have in common? Cartography? Is that what you're saying?
I said that's fucking funny.
Like, one makes maps of the world and one makes maps of your life.
Right, yeah, maps. Oh, dude, I have, by the way, I have an idea for an interesting episode after this. We'll go ahead and talk about it.
I'm super down. Right. Well, we also were talking, it reminded me when you were speaking, I'm like, oh, we still need to do our episode on archetypes, which we were going to do.
Yeah.
Also,
yeah, no, that's a cool idea. Yeah, sometimes, you know, Emily and I, we, in terms of like coordinating our schedules, some episodes, like, you guys know us, like our Buddhism episode, that took so long to prepare for and to enhance, I guess. So archetypes, that'll be something that when we have time to do some homework, so that you guys get the best for your zero bang for your buck.
Right. Zero bang.
Anyway, that's all I got. Cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead and start with the history part. I'm really curious to see what you came up with or what you discovered.
Well, essentially, I just kind of dove into the way that people throughout time and their relationship to the land governed, kind of their spirituality governed the way that they communicated with nature and that sort of thing. And this is having a relationship with the land is one of the most human things possible, like kind of at the core of it, right? Like
if not the most human thing. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like the land is what made us survive and all of that stuff, but it also has influenced our spirituality so often, because though I know that from all of my channeling and things that I know that these deities did walk on earth and that sort of thing, a lot of the times deities were the personification of different aspects of the land and of the different places. And now it's really different because we have forgotten a lot of that, or we don't think of it in the same way, where right, where like thinking going back to my roots in like my ancient Greek studies, it's like Helios wasn't the god of the sun, he was the sun. Like that, he was the actual thing. That's what Titans were. They weren't an embodiment of the thing, they were the thing. Like Nut in ancient Egyptian stuff, she was the sky. It wasn't she was the goddess of the sky, she was the sky, and Geb was the
animism.
earth.
That's pure animism. Like for it to be like I came across it. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I totally I think that's so interesting. I came across, we were going to do an episode on animal magic, and I think this is totally relevant in terms of like personifying certain things with characteristics of character itself. And it said that animism tells us all that the phenomenons that we experience have an actual agency or a force behind it. And I thought that was such an interesting way to describe animism, like that the phenomenon we experience has a force behind it that is congruent and intellectual.
Which I also feel like rings really true for the energy of a thing. Like yeah, there's these natural things that happen, but there is a force behind these things in a lot of sense. Like I think it makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Energetically too. And like there is these beings that do help with these certain things, and there is these spirits that do, influence the land in certain ways, and these energies of different parts of the land, and they are different, and it does feel really interesting. And energetically it makes sense that they would have had things to come up with of like, or talk to different deities that help with that, or whatever it was that happened historically. And so it's important to note that our relationship with the land, so when we go back to like very tribal times, right, where even closer, nearer times when like Native Americans and that stuff, they were still very tribal, when a lot of the rest of the world was less tribal at the time, etc. But in really tribal culture and really tribal times, obviously there's a great reverence for the land, because they know that that's where all of their food comes from. They know where all of this stuff actually is originating from. So there's a worship and a connection to the spirits of the land. Just super aside, and I just thought of this while I was doing research, and it just made me smile. One of the reasons Brother Bear is like my favorite Disney movie of all time is because it illustrates this concept in a way that children can understand, and I just like appreciate that so fucking acutely. So I just wanted to like call that out because I love it so much. Oh, Brother Bear is based on the Inuit people, and all of their spirits go up into essentially the Northern Lights, and one guy kills a bear out of anger because the bear killed his brother, even though it was just being natural. And he ends up getting turned into a bear and has to learn his lesson essentially of how to respect nature and like go through the whole thing. Really fucking cool.
Work. Yeah, that's adorable.
It's amazing. I love it. And the music, music is all done by Phil Collins, so the same guy who did Tarzan music. So it's like really good music, and yeah, it's really beautiful. I love it very, very much. But yeah, I thought about that. I was like, that's such a great way. And even like now going to like Frozen 2, it's again like respect the spirits of nature and stuff for kids. And it's just, I really appreciated that. But again, it's from that very kind of tribal aspect of like, you had such an intimate connection with nature. And now our relationship with the energies of nature and places and topography and all of this different stuff has changed so much, because it's less based on our survival, where we're in tune with the land. We know what's going on with the land because we have to be in tune with it in order to live. And now we're so disconnected. We get to see these energies and kind of it's both a blessing and a curse, because one, we're not so connected that as we used to, so we are able to understand, but two, now we get to look at kind of the whole globe's energy. We get to look at the different actual different topography that these ancient peoples never would get to see. Exactly. So we have this really unique position where we now exist, where we can go and travel to these different locations and tune in and sense the energy from kind of an external perspective, because we're not relying on the land for our life. So we can have a different type of reverence with the same energy of the location, which I think is just really fucking beautiful. Like kind of at the core of it, like it's pretty amazing. If you're tuned in enough where you pay attention to that, it's a really cool thing.
or even just people that like to go camping, man. I think that, yeah, because we do have this separation from it, is caused, like, it's caused a massive amount of disturbance in our development spiritually, in our development emotionally. But then again, we have like this, like the idea of cities and that being its own environment, man-made environment, you know, and that's interesting. I didn't even think about that in terms of topography. Like, a city's a topography too. And that's a whole, like, maybe that would be an interesting episode, is tuning into like the idea of cities, civilization wise, what it does to us, you know, all that. But with that aside, like, looking at, yeah, we're able to see we see nature as something outside of ourselves, which is, you know, once again, a blessing and a curse. We're able to see, like, we're able to revere it. Like, dude, I grew up in the Carson Valley, or like in Tahoe, and then a lot of the time in the Carson Valley on the other side of Lake Tahoe, on the other side of these mountains. And now that I've moved away and I've come back, I look at these mountains in absolute awe. Every fucking day I wake up and I get to see Job's Peak, and I don't get tired of it. It's so big, and there's something so strong about it. And that's how I got the idea of this episode, is because I'm driving down the road and I look up at the mountain, and I was like, and I find myself constantly like asking myself, what is the energy of that mountain? Like, what does that represent, you know? And once again, with what my specialty being in like archetypes and symbolism and stuff, and the psychology of it, I was like, it represents this, this, and this. And that's how I did my research for the episode. Like, I went and did the energy and the idea of the desert, the mountains, water, meaning like ocean, as well as river topography, and then a little bit of tropical, because I was like, all right, I couldn't deny it. I kept tuning in to, all right, what other energy is coming up, and it kept saying tropical. I was like, I don't know, I haven't experienced much of it, and I was like, we've got to bring it up because it is interesting. At least, like,
I love how you're like, I love how in that you're like, not Arctic though, fuck you, cold.
What's on the two? I was like, ice. I was like, we could go there, but then I'm gonna be talking about aliens and underground civilizations and shit. And I'm not prepared to do that tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to talk about the Nazi underground shit. Like,
well, I went down the rabbit hole of giants for like 5 minutes, and I was like, we're not giants. We're not doing the giants yet. We'll do a giants episode.
Yeah. Cool.
Because it's a cool thing, but like, because topography, oftentimes people are like, they call them sleeping giants, and I was like, well, that's an interesting thought. Like, how could I think about, like mountains and different areas?
Yeah, I like that idea. Or like all those, like, if you like being able to like the idea of the green man, you know, and a lot of, I guarantee it's not just a Celtic thing, but like the idea of being able to look at a tree or something, like, or like my fucking tapestry back here, you know, being able to look at something and being able to see a face in it, or to recognize like a human face in it, or some type of face in like in the tops of mountains. Like, you can see women with boobies, and you can see other faces.
Well,
you know,
that's why the ski run at Heavenly is called the Face, is because if you look at the mountain, it's shaped like a face.
Yeah, see, and that's what a human thing. You know, we can't help it. We're the only thing that we know of that is like us, and so we're trying so hard to respond to everything else that has such a different capacity for consciousness.
So yesterday I got a new phone, and I got excited because this directly relates. I got excited because the back of the phone camera looks like a little face, and I got just like ridiculously stoked about it for no reason, because I'm like, oh, that's cute, and I was like, what? It's not an actual face.
That's such a female thing to do.
But they say, from an artistic perspective, if you're doing landscape drawings and things like that, if you hide a face in there, people will like your art a lot more, because they'll be able to see the face, and then it feels familiar.
That's cool. Do you remember the things from the when we were kids, like those pictures that just look like absolute nonsense, but once you're able to like unfocus your eyes, you have like dragons and shit that pop forward?
Dude, yes, I was trying to buy some of those for my kids for Christmas last year, and they're no longer in print, which I don't understand. Those are the coolest things ever. So you have to find them at like thrift bookstores, which was just really challenging, which pissed me off. But like, they were the coolest things. They were so neat.
They're probably like, yeah, that shit's bad for your eyes. Yeah, can't be good for you, but you know, it is what it is.
I definitely did spend a lot of time staring at the colors on the page.
Like learning to focus, unfocus your eyeballs. Anyway, that's funny. But you know what? So I guess that is pretty directly related to the idea of being able to like anthropomorphize these entities or these like landscapes. I was so like, in addition to the idea of the energy of mountains and what mountains represent, and I'll go into kind of my description of that, but I also, like, my next thought was automatically desert. And not just, I think maybe not just because I do live in the, or we live in the high desert area, but the idea of the desert is so interesting. And I've been talking to someone out in Arizona, and I asked them, I was like, what is your because that's a different type of desert than we have here, you know? Because we live technically in the high desert. So I'm like, what is the energy of the desert out there to you? And so that was like, it's so interesting to me. Like, I don't necessarily resonate with it, but I can appreciate it. Like, I'm a fucking forest person, you know, like that. I need to be around the forest in order to feel like my utmost self. But the desert's got a really strong beauty that, off the top of my head, I want to say it's masculine, but it's not necessarily. It can be very, like, strongly feminine.
Yeah. With, I was thinking a little bit about, like, as I was preparing for this episode, the necessity of all the different energies of all the different topography of Earth and how important it is to have these different energetic zones, essentially, to keep it balanced. It was more of like as an energetic balance system. And I like how you referred to it. You're like, it's almost like a divine masculine, because it is almost like a divine masculine kind of energy. And I feel like certain topographies have a more specific divine feminine or a more specific divine masculine kind of energy that come from them. And then some are very much a blend, which is fantastic also. Totally. But I was just thinking about that kind of similar thing of like, it's so essential to have the energy balance of these different locations on this planet. And it's part of that, I guess, talking about aliens and underground civilization and all that, but it's part of that, you know, hey, Earth is kind of an experiment, you know, Earth is kind of like a place where all these different beings in the universe are kind of watching us and like, hey, we put a bunch of stuff on this planet that isn't on all these other planets. So let's see if it all works together, kind of energy that has been, you know, channeled and theorized by people that's how Earth kind of is, which I haven't got the similar message. I've gotten kind of similar messages, but not like dead on. So yeah, but that is a big theory of that people have channeled of like, hey, that's what Earth is just this kind of playground.
I wouldn't say that's necessarily how it started, but it's definitely been a part of it. You know what I mean? Like, that's not how it began, but that's how it's been played for a while.
Totes, absolutely. Like, and so it's interesting to think about that, of how necessary then that is to have had a balance when it was kind of invested in, you know, like to have these areas of very little life, is in like the desert, where it has to be very barren. And that is a really, really cool energy in a way. Like to experience that energy is actually really profound, because it's a great reflection of our inner peace. Whenever you're like, clear your mind, that's like the planet version of clear your mind. Like, stand out in the desert in the middle of the night when it's cold in Death Valley and look up at the fucking stars and tell me that's not clearing your mind. Like, that's exactly how it feels.
Nevada, man. Well, speaking of Death Valley, that was one thing I wanted to bring up. There is this woman, and I don't remember her name necessarily, but in Death Valley, there's this place called the Amargosa Opera House. Are you familiar with that?
I haven't been in it, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I'm talking about, yeah. So this lady, she was a classically trained ballerina from New York, and she came to Death Valley. And I mean, mind you guys, like, I think like, what, 20 people live in the Death Valley area, if not, you know?
Yeah. So if you guys don't know what Death Valley is, it's the lowest point on the planet that's above sea level.
Oh, I guess I didn't know that.
Yeah, Death Valley is the lowest place in the world. But that's above sea level. So obviously the stuff underneath sea level is going to be lower. But it is actually below sea level technically, but it is like on land, if that makes sense. So it is the lowest point of the whole planet, where like Everest or some of these Antarctica mountains might even be taller, because we don't really know Antarctica research very much in that space. Like, I've read an article recently that they're like, this is probably taller than Everest, but we don't really know.
Yeah. Sure.
So if Everest is the tallest, Death Valley is its antithesis, essentially. Death Valley is excruciatingly hot in the summer. And it's also located like 3 hours from Christy and I. So it's like right there, which is why we're really familiar with it when we're talking about it. So just to give you guys kind of a background in case you don't know, it does have magnificent wildflowers. I'll give it that. But you have to come in very, very early spring, like right now, or else they're going to be dead by the time you go, because it's going to be hot.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that. I just know that, at least, like, and I mean, I've driven through it. I was there pretty recently. I was there 2 summers ago, just driving through. There's actually this really, it's not necessarily in Death Valley, but it's close to, it's this place called like the Existential Forest or something. And there's all of these buses that are sitting on their ass, and they're painted facing forward. It's like not just buses, but other like broken down cars and stuff. It's like an art forest made out of cars. Anyway, so there's that. But this lady, went to Death Valley, and apparently she just fell in love with the area, and she has this building, the Amargosa Opera House, and she painted the inside of it. So she dances to herself, like she dances to people if they come to see her, but she also dances by herself in front of no one because she's classically trained. And I guess she's probably pretty fucking eccentric. Or maybe she was, I don't think she's alive anymore, but she painted like a classical, like she painted kings and queens, artists, like all these people on the walls to like be a so-called pseudo audience for her to dance to. But she talked about the idea of like no other landscape is more artistic than the desert, and that all artists, I mean, this is just quoting her, that all artists are drawn to the desert because it's pure opportunity. It's pure ability to like expansiveness, and it's barren essentially. So that all you have is like your imagination. And so it's all room, like think of Burning Man. And that's my immediate next point, is the idea of Burning Man, the idea of being able to go out into the desert. And like, we're lucky being from Nevada. In some ways I didn't appreciate it, but in this way, like, we're a very interesting area, man. And there is so much artistry, even though it is so-called barren.
Yeah, I mean, Nevada is really barren. Like fucking 75% of the state is uninhabitable. Like it's really, there's a lot of nothing in Nevada, but that is true. Like the salt flats are here, and different things where you can just go out and it is just nothing, and that is very creative. And to bring that up too, with both Burning Man and then when you're talking about the existential forest, which is just, you know, the cars out there that are painted, there is something really beautiful. And last week Freddie Silva talked a little bit about this too, and he touched on the fact of like humans can tune in and see these energies even without acknowledging that they're seeing them. And then oftentimes people establish a coffee shop, right, where these really powerful energies are, or whatever. And I feel like that is a lot of what happens in the desert. It's even a little bit clearer, and you'll find these things like art installations, or even like around like hot springs that are out in the desert, which there are many.
Area 51.
Area 51, or Burning Man, where we create our own topography to match the level of energetic input that we're feeling kind of coming into that zone, which I think is just really, really powerful. And it's also important to note, for those of you who maybe don't live right near the desert or maybe don't understand, like the desert still has mountains. Like much desert has mountains.
Nevada has more mountain peaks than any other state in the country. Even more than Colorado. And we have more ghost towns than regular like inhabited towns. Isn't that funny?
No, that makes perfect sense. Having lived in Nevada for so long.
There's so much to experience. Like, yeah, interesting. I mean, if you're into shit that used to mean something, you know what I mean?
Man, I fucking love ghost towns. Abandoned buildings are my shit. I don't know what it is. If we drive down the road and there's an abandoned building out in a pasture, like I just love it so much. Mostly because I'm like, oh, you were someone's dream. Like you were someone's established, like there was a family, there's history here that nobody probably knows anymore. And I just love that feeling.
I agree. That means we're sentimental, I think.
I mean, for people that aren't me, like for lives that I didn't live, I guess, sentimental.
Sentimental because it meant something to someone at one point, you know what I mean? And the knowledge that it was something, and knowing that it no longer is something, and knowing that like we'll never know that in between, that's like fucking poetry. Like, how interesting, like, you know?
Also being raised out here in like mining country where there's just abandoned shit everywhere. Like I've ridden horses to abandoned mining camps, and I've driven out into the middle of like Virginia City, and like that was what we did in school. Is like, hey, let's send some kids down a mine shaft. Like this is just like things that happen. And so I feel like there's part of that too, of like, how did that get there? Like you had to find trees to build this thing, and then that had to, you know, and
trek in water, and like, it's just it's really interesting. You know what I came across? So in doing my research, so I just kind of like, you know, I did my own personal like tuning into the energies and the ideas and the archetypes of the energy. And then I did some research on like what the metaphysics of the desert, metaphysics of the ocean, blah, blah, blah. And I guess there was this Italian priest named Carlo Carretto, and he said, the desert does not mean the absence of man, but it means the presence of God. And I guess you can kind of say that about any wilderness, I would say. Yeah. But I just thought that was an interesting, like, direct quote about the desert itself.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, it makes sense. It's the same. It's like saying what the artist said, but different.
Yeah, well, it's huge. I mean, the heaviness of desert, but also like, you know, it can go like, at least in Nevada, especially like going to Burning Man, you have like these extreme temperatures during the daytime, and then it drops so drastically in nighttime. So you have this like, you have the low of Death Valley, and then the high of like Mount Whitney, and all these like everything in between, which is almost, it seems
Mount
like
Whitney,
nothing and everything at the same time.
Mount Whitney is literally touching Death Valley, you guys, and it is the highest peak in the US. So just to give you like the weird distinction, like you could hike to the highest peak and experience the lowest low at the same fucking time.
Yeah.
Like in the same 2 days you could do that, which is just
totally
a trip.
So that's, you know, so anyway, that's like my discussion on the desert portion of it.
I will also say there is so many different types of desert, but we're talking, so for those of you who are like, but yeah, like what about the Sahara Desert though? You guys are talking about like Arizona and Nevada. I'm like, yeah, those are very different. That being said, the energetics feel very similar. The energetics of vast emptiness, the energetics of far reaching extremes of heat and cold, like the energetics of that feel very similar, just in different locations to serve different, I think probably means like to balance out that particular area. So just, that's my interpretation of it, because tuning into the energy of both the high desert versus the low desert, you know, I don't know if it's called the low desert, the extra sandy one, I don't know. But, right. But they feel energetically very similar as far as those topics.
Yeah, I'm uncertain. I guess to me they feel pretty different, and I've thought about that too, and I guess I forgot to confront that, because I was like, that I don't understand. I've never experienced the Sahara Desert or anything like that. And also, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what to say about that portion. I don't know. Here it just feels like there's more going on under the surface, but that's because we're like, I know that there's crystals under the surface. I know that there's gold. Like I know what we have here, so I'm not sure about there. But it's more primordial, I would say, out in like the Sahara and different parts of like the Middle East.
Yeah, I would say with that too, one major energetic thing that I feel that like the desert pushes people to do is to appreciate oasis and appreciate water and appreciate those things. Like it drives people together and reminds people of their own mortality in like that kind of really profound way, which I just think is really, really cool energetically.
Or it can fucking pit them against each other.
I mean, it can, but
depending on where, like, if you haven't had water and your fucking buddy has water, like you find it, you know what I mean? Like it can be, that's interesting what, like that fine line between like, and they say like, there's that song Right In Two from Tool, and he's talking about, you know, monkey killing monkey, when we choose to split, or we choose to fight over an apple as opposed to splitting the apple. You know, we choose to fight over water as opposed to sharing water. And if we were to choose to share resources as opposed to fight over them and crave like an entirety of something, then we would, you know, we would be far more progressed as a species, but we're still learning that. So anyway, there's that.
I think we're relearning that. I think we're relearning it. I don't actually think that we're learning it for the first time, because if you look way back, another fucking ant is on my computer. What is going on? Like, it's snowing. Why are there ants? Like, okay, sorry, that was just really weird. This, I don't understand. I don't get it. The house I live in.
Not about you, Emily. Okay, right? It needs to stay warm too.
Okay, the house I live in is basically just outside, but indoors, though. I
guess like me too, Emily. Me too. Okay.
Right? It's as close as you can get to like like I've had the craziest animals come into this house. And I'm like, how the fuck did you get in here?
Dude, we've had snakes get into Denver's house in Arkansas. Like, wait, there's a fucking snake in his house. I pee my pants? We
had an ermine. I mean, that's like a little white winter weasel just like running through my living room. I'm like, wow. Why are you here?
And your dog didn't murder it?
No, well, Callum's super gentle and sweet. He loves the bunny.
He probably thought, he's like, what's one of the rabbits?
That's what I think he did. So I have rabbits. I think that's what it was. But like, yeah, also the thing was smart as hell, but we didn't have a mouse problem at all for like a couple months because it was eating all the mice.
Oh,
and it turns out as long as you don't touch them, they're pretty much safe. Like they don't carry a lot of disease. Their poop doesn't carry disease. Like they're pretty chill critters, but it was in my house, which was not pleasant necessarily. And that's
funny.
I don't understand.
Anyway,
okay, so back to that.
Yeah.
What I was
Let's
going
be
to say is,
oh,
as far as relearning,
yeah.
the whole resource thing, I do believe that like it wasn't, I truly feel that before basically the rise of the Greek Empire, and then I don't think that's an actual empire, but you know what I mean, the Greek civilization, and then the Roman Empire. Prior to that, there was a lot more resource sharing. There was a lot more like collaborative humanity of like, this is, I mean, people still fought, and I'm not saying that that didn't happen, but it wasn't, the energy of it is very different. And of course, before all of that is like your Atlantis, and then your Lemuria, and like that sort of energy too. And that is very collaborative society to its downfall, essentially. If you look at the Atlantean history of like, yes, we're sharing everything with the Martians, and then eventually the Martians were like, fucking want all of it, and they were like, well, we're sharing with you all that we have, you know, that sort of thing. So eventually kind of to the downfall. But there's a lot more of that resource sharing, a lot more of that, hey, we all need this to kind of survive, we're all going to figure out how to make this work and survive. And specifically in like Egypt and that sort of thing, it's like, out of the desert, this is the only place where we can survive. So all the people were in this Nile River Valley. There wasn't other places you could really go. And that was, you know, unless you went to the ocean and then traveled across that. But, you know, so I do feel like there was a lot more of that ancient history wise. And now we're kind of relearning it in a modern, resources are more plentiful because we've made them more plentiful for a vaster amount of people based on new technologies and all sorts of that sort of stuff. And now it's like, hold on the fuck though, like under, you know, just because money doesn't dictate how you get to live and all these other things that need to come up that are, we're starting to have to be like, no, we need to go back to like a resource sharing kind of basis and relearning and re-understanding that. And that's in my personal opinion, the way the energy feels to me.
Well, I guess we learn in cycles. That's like they say, the spiral is the oldest symbol in the human consciousness, and I believe that. Like this self-similarity of, you know, we learn a lesson, we progress through the consequences or the benefits of whatever happens, and then we feel like, oh my God, why is this happening again? It's like, yeah, but it's not the same thing. It's self-similar in a way that it's a similar lesson, but you've already gone through everything in between to get to that point. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, so the human development, I mean, being cyclical or cyclical, I guess, for whomever wants me to say it that way. Speaking of water, like when I tuned in, one of my ideas I have here is the idea of rivers versus oceans versus lake. And the interesting, like the ocean terrifies me. I've always been pretty iffy about water. Like like I said, I'm a forest person, but I'm a forest person with the river. And like, if there's the two combinations, like that is ultimately me at my absolute best, is like being near the river inside the forest. And so you have the river, like the small Carson River, but then you have like the fucking Mississippi, which is, or the Colorado River, which is power, dude. That is, it's feminine in the way that it is able to flow and direct itself in whichever way it chooses. However, it has direct paths that it tends to follow through, and it will kick your ass. Like water is heavy, man.
Yeah, water is extremely intense. I love water so fucking much, and pretty much every iteration of it. If I could do one thing every day, it would be swim, period. I'm definitely, that's why I can't ever leave Lake Tahoe. I can't even live more than 3 blocks away from this lake. I swear to God, it's like a problem, which I don't live more than 3 blocks away right now for that exact reason. I can walk to the water because
I'm stressed out hearing that, like living in the same place forever. I'm like, oh my God, it's the worst thing ever.
I have left. I just always come back.
Sure.
And when I did leave, I ended up living, and when I did leave, I lived next to the ocean. Like, you know, I lived next to like that level of water.
I guess I need to feel the same way about a river. I need to live like within like 20 minutes at most of a nature spot like that.
It just has to, there's something about it that's really powerful. I feel like I'm a forest person too, but again, the water element is so potent and important to me in so many different ways. And both, like, I feel fairly comfortable swimming in the ocean too, you know, given as long as it's like a safe location, obviously. But like when we were in Hawaii and snorkeling around, it felt great. It felt the same. It felt normal. It felt very empowering, and I could feel the ocean, you know, like feel the energy of the ocean there, and feel its consciousness essentially at the core of it. And it feels really strong. And then also the consciousness of Lake Tahoe feels very strong. And, you know, also the difference in the ocean when I lived up on the Northern California coast, up in the Redwoods, that was an entirely different energetic ocean feel. All were just really powerful and really strong and just really valuable, I guess, at the core of it. Is like all of it is so valuable and just so beautiful, and the fact how much life can get harbored in any water is just really neat.
Well, I mean, remember, if you guys go back to our episode with Lynn Orwig, she was a blood doctor, but I think we talked about the magic of water as well, and how water, there's a terabyte of memory that gets stored in a droplet of water, and it's because it's not stored in the droplet, it's stored in the energy field around the water, and that's some weird physics shit that I don't necessarily comprehend, but I'm able to reiterate. However, I know that for my birthday, when I went to the San Pedro ceremony for my birthday, and they do this thing called the water prayer, and it really transitioned my idea of water, the consciousness of water, because it's easy to say like water's in everything, but to recognize that water's in everything. Water went into water's in us, and water went into growing all of the food that we inhabit or that we take in. Water went into, like, I don't know, like every resource that we have required water to be able to develop it. And so to recognize like that truly is like to pray to the water itself is to pray to life itself. And that is, I mean, so being so available and so readily like accepting and in delight of the water, how is it that you come to terms with the idea of it being so expansive and so like you can't see beneath you in the ocean? You know what I mean? You can barely see beneath you in the lake. Like, how do you deal with the fact of it being so amorphous yet so encompassing at the same time?
It's a great question. First of all, I just need to tell you the image my guides flashed in front of my brain when you said the food we inhabit. It was just like you inside of a hamburger, and I just like needed to share that with you. It was very cute.
Yeah, your guys I don't even eat a hamburger, bitch.
I know, but it was just like Christy Burger. Like, what's this? Thanks, guys. I didn't eat that one, but it was grand.
It makes me think of Keenan and Kel. Who loves orange soda? Kel loves orange soda. Welcome to Good Burger, home of the Good Burger. May I take your order? Anyway, thanks guys. Looking out.
Yeah. So there you go. But honestly, it's a lot, because for a while it was still like, I mean, you're a kid, and when I was a kid growing up, my dad had a 1967 Chris Craft boat. So it was lime green. It had groovy flowers on the side. It was called the Dragon Lady because it was created during the summer of love. And obviously I'm far younger than that. So the boat was far older than me. And so we would go around on the lake in this like boat. And I remember being in the middle and like my dad being like, jump off. And I'm like, I can't see beneath me. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm not jumping off of this boat. Yeah. Like, or as Weston says it, I just don't understand why someone would get on a perfectly good boat and then choose to leave it. Like,
that's funny.
Fair enough.
I would swim underneath the boats in Arkansas. My girlfriend, we'd like swim underneath her boat. I don't know how I allowed myself to do that. I'm terrified of water, but we did it.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, it's a level of comfort that, like, that's been a very consistent thing in my entire life. Like, sure. I lived right near the lake growing up, so every day during the summer for every year of my entire life, it was down at the lake and swimming and pushing yourself to do different things and going under this and diving to the bottom and like all of these certain things. I mean, it also helps knowing that there's literally nothing in Tahoe that's going to eat you.
Yeah, totally.
You know, like there's big ass fish, but they're not going to do anything, you know, and they're way, way, way deep. So like, it's just a very safe, it's a safe lake.
That's a good point. Yeah.
At the core of it, as long as you monitor your body temperature, that is, because it can be cold as fuck.
Or the waves, dude. The fact that we're like, we have the ability to have these like really enormous waves. And we could have a tsunami if we were like, because our lake, I think it's like one of the 10th deepest lakes in the world. If we were to have an earthquake in the area, then it would fucking tsunami-ize South Shore, North Shore.
It's the fourth. I mean, I could talk on a whole like Lake Tahoe trivia forever because I was the tour guide, but it's the fourth deepest lake in the world, right behind Lake Titicaca. It's right after that. There's enough water in Lake Tahoe to cover the entire state of Texas in 4 inches.
Interesting. Yeah. I didn't know that.
The amount of water that evaporates off of the surface of Lake Tahoe on a daily basis is enough to provide the entire city of Los Angeles with their water needs for an entire day.
stay the fuck away from us, LA.
I know, but you like it's that. That's how
Mono
big
Lake,
a fucking
okay?
lake it is. Yeah, you guys get your shit. You're good. It's a very protected resource. No one can tap Lake Tahoe for shit. But that's just like the amount of water that is in this lake is that vast. It's so deep. So it's 1,600 feet deep. So if you were to find a 10-story building and stack 16 of it on top of one another, that's how deep the lake is. And then you in the Carson Valley are not at the bottom of Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and mind you guys, we talked about the mountains. These fucking mountains are mountains,
They're
dude.
big.
Like, they tower.
Yeah, they're very,
They're
very
powerful,
big.
man.
Mm-hmm.
The idea, like, I guess I didn't even talk about the idea of the mountains, like what mountains represent. Like if you were to do part of the idea of this episode, I wanted to talk about is like magic for those that are practitioners. If you wanted to tune into, or like energy workers at all, if you wanted to tune into these energies, like tune into the idea of the desert. What do you get from that? You can get an idea of vastness. You can get an idea of being okay with duality and like totality as well as nothingness. But with the mountains, you have steadfastness, you have wildness, as well as like you have the big mountain itself, the big landscape, and then you have all the nooks and crannies that go into those mountainous caverns that like there's so much, what did I say? There's so much hardness as well as wildness and complexity. Yeah, allowing this to coexist simultaneously. Like that energy is really like to be able to challenge.
I feel like that leads into something that I wanted to definitely talk about at this episode too, of how the planet is a reflection of our internal. It's just like we're a fractalated version of like the way that the planet exists, right? So so just like you're saying, like that this is what the mountains represent, and this duality and this strength and all these different things. It's like that is the way that we feel about ourselves a lot of the time. And the same thing with the deserts, with the vast emptiness, and like, okay, we got to make something out of nothing. That's also how we feel out about ourselves and how we process things. And the forest of this, so hidden components, and everything can change all the times, and so full of life and growth, and we have a lot of that in us as well. And then the ocean of this power, this flow, this energy, and water in general, and like that's part of us too. So it's just a really interesting energy to look at as far as the different components of the earth around us versus our internal aspects that mirror those completely.
That reminds me of the idea of like, they say that 5 is the number of man, and it's because, and like the idea of the pentacle. So you have the pentacle, which is the star, and it's the head, it's the 2 arms, and it's the 2 feet of the humankind, but it also represents spirituality residing over consciousness, residing over all of the elements. So I guess in the same way, and also we naturally, our perception is to relate to things as humans. Like that is one of the grandest capacities we have as humans, is this idea to relate, to perceive, to correspond. So like we see, like we can symbolically represent anything with anything else if we try hard enough, same in the same way, like you say, yeah, I'm a Capricorn, I'm a Sagittarius, blah, blah, blah. And you can kind of find any, like there is like this consistency across the board, but you can find something in anything if you're looking for it. And that's some of the beauty of being human, I guess.
Yeah. I'll also say with that too is land energy has certain magnetism. So the energetic vortexes and the energetic waves that come off of different topographies have magnetism. So if there is and this goes for man-made topography as well. So like touching on the cities thing, like cities have their own energy vortexes that are created. And we talked about that in our Vortex and Ley Line episode a lot. Yeah. So if you guys haven't listened to that one's a pretty fun one. We talk about that quite extensively, but they have their own kind of, they have some of their own energetic pull as well. So if you're feeling drawn to a certain energetic location, and sometimes it comes out of nowhere, if you're like, I really want to go to someplace tropical. Why? Don't know. Haven't been there, but I really need to go for whatever reason. Probably the energy that is coming off of that place is the energy that you really need right now for some balance within yourself internally, for some level of growth that you need to experience in some way. For me, I always feel like I need to go to San Francisco like once every 2 years, 3 years. I'm like, I need to go sit in San Francisco energy, because that energy vortex just really feeds my artistic soul. So it's usually when I'm feeling creatively blocked. It's usually when I'm feeling disconnected from some sort of like creative inspiration energy. I'm like, need to go to San Francisco. Why? No idea. But it's just that energy vortex. That's the energy that really pulls to me. I feel the same way about the redwoods. I need to get pulled there sometimes just in order to absorb the energy. It's a little bit different than when you're pulled to like a period of time. It's more of like you're pulled to a specific landscape. You're being pulled to a specific energy. Canyons versus mountains, you know, versus snow versus
culture
tropics.
too. Like the culture that is surrounding like the idea of like my relationship with Washington, you know, like, or like even Hot Springs, Arkansas. Like I keep like, you know, so there's the inner relationship between humans, our culture, and our relationship with the land. Like that's what we're talking, that's what this whole episode's about.
Yeah, just at the core of it. And it's really beautiful to get to think about the land without needing to work the land to make our own food and to figure out if the storm is going to kill us or if we need to reinforce our structure. Like we're so privileged. I was actually thinking about this the other day at the store. If we've created so much comfort for ourselves that we've actually like out-humaned ourselves. So now we don't know what to do. And that maybe is why there's so much anxiety and stuff going on.
Exactly what it is.
Yes, but in like a deeper, I was going on a much deeper level of like energetically, where we never supposed to reach this level of comfort, or when we reach this level of comfort, is it now we have to evolve energetically and emotionally because we've out-humaned our needs essentially at the core of it. It was just a very deep level of, I'm going to wait in behind this 35 person line because it's spring break in Tahoe line and think about life stuff. So I was just kind of thinking about that, but we're not so dependent or afraid of the land as we once were as a species, as we once were even in our past lives and that sort of thing. Now we get to experience the land in an entirely different way and get to tune into the energies of the land in an entirely different way. And it's a huge privilege, and we're really, really lucky to exist during this period of time where we get that honor. And also it's important. But now we also have to do it consciously. So before, when we had to do it subconsciously because it was something that we had to do all the time and revere the land and work on because we needed our food and because
we knew how to survive the land though. You know what I mean? Like we'd be FECKED.
But that's what I mean. Like we were subconscious with it. Like it was just part of what we were. And now we have to be very conscious to choose to connect with the land. We have to consciously choose to go to these different topographies, or at least astral travel to these different topographies, or meditate with the energy of these different topographies. Like listening to the music of the native peoples of a land. The tribal native peoples of a specific location is a very, very good way to connect with the energy of that actual topography. So
that goes for white people too. We have, and you know me, I talk about this all the time. We have indigenous culture, you guys, and I think honestly, it's all drums, not just for all cultures everywhere. I think a lot of it comes down to drums, and I think that would be an interesting episode too. Is the spirituality of drumming and what that represents to us.
Yeah, or just indigenous music,
that too. Yeah, I guess in the grander scape of it, sure.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Yeah, so that's a really great, like if you're like, I can't exactly travel to rural China to go to this place that I feel really drawn to, that's okay. Listen to some, like indigenous or ancient Chinese music and feel that out and feel that energy. Like that is a really, really good way to do it, because that's the closest way of capturing energy that we have is actually via sound. So a lot of listening to that indigenous stuff, or the music of a certain area, this is going to be a way that you get to feel very much that energy being kind of sent to you. So
whale sounds.
When we swam with dolphins, because we snorkeled with wild dolphins when we went to Hawaii, you could hear all of them talking, and it was really cool.
How interesting.
It was really loud. I'm not gonna lie. It was weird because like usually underwater everything's quiet, right?
Yeah.
Like dive under and everything's like extra quiet, and it was like it was like very loud.
Yeah, high pitched. Huh? I guess I would have imagined it would have been like more bassy.
I mean, no.
I guess that'd be more of a whale thing.
They can actually. I read a study a while back that dolphins actually, they don't perceive sound the way we do, where we hear it. They actually perceive it in 3D images in their mind. Like they can transfer 3D images via sound to one another, which
that's dope. They're smarter than us.
Blows my brain apart.
They're smarter than us. That's for sure. That's
Totally.
cool. All we can do is look up to them.
Totally. Like, thank you, dolphins, for existing.
Thank you, dolphins. Aw.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, I guess the only other area I had to talk about was tropical, and for some reason last night when I kept trying to tune into the idea of tropical energy, I kept hearing the word sharp. It seemed sharp to me, which is like kind of counterintuitive in the way that you think of, like, my immediate reaction is like greenery and really long, broad leaves. But I guess I immediately thought like poison, like everything is so beautiful and potentially poisonous, like I would die. I would never know the difference between a poisonous plant and non-poisonous plant, you know? And so for some reason I kept perceiving it as sharp, even though it's like really sweet, but it's like, you think of the Venus flytrap, like it's so beautiful, but it'll like, come here, dead, you know?
Yeah. I feel like it to me, it pulls to the energy of the wilds within us all, the like undiscovered deepest part of our hearts and all of that. Like, it's like that energy of just, it's deep and mysterious, and there's more life in it than any other place on the entire fucking earth, and half of it can kill you, so have fun with that.
Yeah. Well, that's how I felt about Arkansas, actually. That's something that I would always say, is that there's so much life that everything's trying to eat itself. Everything's trying to eat everything else, which is what it felt like. Like, there's invisible life that just burrows into your ankles called chiggers. And then there's like snakes and tarantulas. And like, there's so much life because it's so green, but it's like so much life that being from the desert, it is different.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with the tropics, that's a lot of it too. It's also a different relationship with water, which is pretty cool because it comes from the sky, you know, and that's like, it's so constant, and that's where they get, most of the plants have evolved to just absorb it that way. And you know, it's like, yeah, really interesting.
Island life. Yeah, dude, that's that's a very, the indigenous cultures of that area, that's really interesting, man. I've been really interested to listen to a lot of like tribal Peruvian music or something, you know, like tribal Bahamian music. That'd be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting I love also, if you look at the earth and the energy of the different topographies, they mirror each other on all the continents, and it's pretty crazy. Like, if you think about it, like the equator is pretty much your belt of tropics, like, right? Like all the way around the earth, you know that that's going to be some tropical stuff. But then if you get down to like the Australia, you know, if you're in like the Australia zone, that's a lot of desert, and that's kind of mirrored in Africa, and there's mirrored in part of like our continent too, and in South America too. Like, there's like mirrors of all of these different energies, and the mountains that are around us, and also like the Rocky Mountains and those sort of things, and the Appalachian Mountains, those are all, or Appalachian,
Appalachian, they'd say, yeah.
Yeah. But those are mirrored in Europe and in Russia, and like all along kind of very similar lines, we have very similar topography, which is just really, really cool and just powerful.
The same way we have mirrored archetypes, mirrored symbolism in all of cultures. Yeah, I mean, we're one thing, you know, is what it comes down to, is we're one really vast, complicated thing. And all we can do is sit and kind of analyze it and talk about it on TV. Hi, guys.
Right. We are just little things talking about big things, which are actually also little things.
Yep. And then littler things to us, so that we feel like big things.
Right. Exactly.
Aw.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool.
In theta healing, the first plane of existence is essentially the earth, like the actual dirt, and then the second plane is like the plants. And it's really cool because like everything has a consciousness, and so it's fun to talk about it in that kind of sense too. So if anyone wants to dive into that, that was my kind of last point on this, is just there are different planes of existence with different levels of consciousness also going on throughout the land and the topography of it as well. Which is just really
totally. And then you say mushrooms, and then that's a whole other thing, like mycelium, dude.
Yeah, mushrooms.
Just serious, dude. The mushrooms they're like 70% of the landmass beneath the ground in a lot of places. Like, mushrooms give density to dirt that we're allowed to like walk on, you know. Anyway, that would be another episode. Mycelium, that shit is, we need to get Paul Stamets on here. I would pee my pants if we got Paul Stamets on here.
Well, I'm gonna
try. Let's do it.
I mean, we've gotten a lot of cool people on here. It's pretty awesome. So.
I know. You guys, I hope you enjoy. Tell us what some of your favorite episodes are, if there's anyone you want us to try and get on as well. This was fun. Cool. I like this episode.
I like this episode too. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening. We genuinely appreciate you guys. If you're not watching us on YouTube, you should go watch us on YouTube. It's pretty fun. Like, we do stuff with our hands and expressions, okay. And you can see what coffee cup I drank out of today, which
I'm wearing a hat.
She's wearing a hat. Yeah. She's also wearing pearls and gauges, which we decided is a name for blog. So
I know, it's like punk. Like, I remember getting my nails done as a teenager, but so I'd have my nails done and I'd be wearing this punk rock like leather jacket too with patches. Like, that's what's up, dude. Perfect.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Like, I am all things. But yes, we appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, as always, you can follow us on Instagram at Perceptionist Anonymous. You can like us on Facebook, Perceptionist Anonymous. We're on YouTube, Perceptionist Anonymous. Also, please don't forget to leave us a review or like us on whatever platform you're listening to us on. It really means a lot. And tell everyone you know that you like us so that maybe they could like us too. That would be really fun. But we genuinely appreciate you guys. It's truly awesome. And if there's anyone you want to see on the show, please shoot us an email or comment on an Instagram thing or whatever. Like, tell us who you want us to get on and we will try very hard to get them on. Obviously, it's been fairly successful so far, so we will just keep that up. But thank you guys. You're fantastic. And as always, remember,